I often think about what I might have missed, clues I didn't pick up on. There were little things I should have caught. But back then, I was too settled in my day-to-day, too happy with what I figured was a solid, predictable life. I've been in Washington my whole life. It's a calm spot, quiet, easygoing. The streets aren't busy, and the air's got that pine and dirt smell. It's the kind of place where folks grow up, get hitched, and stick around. There's something comforting in that, something I didn't appreciate enough. My name's Mike. I'm in my early 40s now, and I've spent most of my grown-up years working with my hands. Started as a helper at a local auto shop, then took over my own place. I fix cars, trucks, anything with a motor. It's not flashy work, but it's real. The pay's not huge, but it covers my bills. I've never been one to chase fancy stuff. Jennifer and I have been together since high school. She was the type of girl everyone noticed, turned heads without even trying. Tall, with a figure that stood out, and eyes that seemed to hold some kind of mystery. She had this knack for pulling people in, making them feel like they mattered. I was hooked the second we met, and over time, she became my whole world. Her touch, her laugh, the way she'd lean her head on my chest at night. Those little moments meant everything. We never had kids. We tried, but it didn't work out. At first, we talked about it a lot, our dreams for the future, a house full of children. But eventually, it was clear it wasn't gonna happen. I thought about it now and then, but I didn't let it take over. It wasn't gonna define who we were. Our life was decent, not thrilling, but steady. I'd spend my days at the shop, fixing cars, chatting with the usual customers. Jennifer worked as a receptionist at the doctor's office in town. It wasn't a glamorous gig, but it paid the bills. She'd do her shift, come home, and we'd eat dinner together, just as till. We'd watch some TV or talk about our day, then hit the sack. Nothing crazy, but it was our life. For years, that setup worked for me. I never thought to question it. But at some point, Jennifer started acting different. It wasn't a big shift at first, more like something sneaking in slow, like fog on a quiet morning. I remember the first time I noticed. She started staying late at work, saying she had extra stuff to take care of. I didn't make much of it. She was a receptionist. Sometimes there were things to do, appointments to set. It seemed like no big deal, nothing to worry about. But it started happening more. She'd get home later, looking worn out but also off somehow. There was a change in how she held herself, how she looked at me. It wasn't anger or annoyance. It was something I couldn't put my finger on. That's when I started noticing the little differences. She'd look at me with soft eyes, but they felt far away. When she used to meet me at the door, her hugs were warm, full of closeness and comfort. Now, it was a quick hug, a peck on the cheek, and she'd slip off to the couch or her room. The connection we used to have was fading, replaced by quiet, by the lack of her touch. Some nights, I'd lie awake, watching her sleep next to me. She looked peaceful, but there was this emptiness I couldn't shake. I'd run my fingers through her hair, hoping to feel that old spark. But her body felt distant, like it wasn't really hers anymore. Her warmth was still there, but it didn't hit me like it used to. There were no big arguments, no harsh words. Just this growing gap between us, a distance I couldn't cross. I tried to reach out to close it, but she'd pull back. The nights when we used to hold each other, wrapped up in the sheets, felt like they belonged to someone else's story. The change was small at first, but it got too big to ignore. Her body, once so open to mine, seemed to pull away. The kisses that used to light a fire between us were now quick, distracted, almost like a chore. She'd turn away when I leaned in for a kiss, brushing by me like it was just another thing to do. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her to get home. It was late, later than normal. I knew her shift ended hours ago. My mind went back to a talk we had weeks earlier about taking a trip, doing something out of the blue, anything to shake up the routine. But Jennifer had given me that tired, far-off smile and said maybe another time. When she walked in that night, I saw it in her eyes before she said a word. Something was different. She was still beautiful, still my wife, but there was an emptiness in her that didn't fit. She kissed me, fast and light, like it was just something to get over with. Then she took off her coat, walked right past me without saying anything, and went to her row. I could feel the heaviness of it all, the stuff we weren't saying. I sat there, quiet, telling myself it was just a rough patch, that it'd blow over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. Something had changed, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't fix what was coming apart. I should have spoken up right then, but I didn't. I should have asked her what was going on. Instead, I let the silence take over. The love she used to show me so easily felt like a memory, and I found myself missing the warmth her touch used to bring. But it was gone, and in my quiet worry, I started wondering if I'd ever get it back. It started small, like a breeze you don't notice until it's already knocked the wind out of you. I didn't want to believe what my gut was saying. I didn't want to think that the woman I'd spent half my life with was slipping away. But the clues were there. It wasn't just how she talked to me or looked at me, it was how she wasn't really there when she was with me. I saw it clearer now. Her habits changed. It wasn't just the late nights anymore. She started spending weekends away from home more. At first, I figured it was no big deal. Jennifer always liked her alone time, catching up with friends or taking short trips to clear her head. I didn't make much of it, but this time, it felt off. She started dressing up more, wearing stuff she hadn't touched in years. Nothing fancy, just casual clothes that made her look sharp without trying. But I noticed. I saw how she'd check herself in the mirror before heading out, fixing her hair, tugging at her skirt. It was small, but it stood out. I remember the first time she came home late from one of those weekend trips. It wasn't new, but something felt wrong. I didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't say. When she walked in, she was quieter than usual, almost distant. I made some excuse to head to the shop, thinking I'd give her space. But the longer I was gone, the more my doubts grew. I couldn't stop thinking about what she was doing when she wasn't home, who she was with. There was something in her eyes that bugged me, something I'd seen before but didn't want to face. She was dodging me, dodging us. I remember one night, sitting in the living room while Jennifer stood by the window, staring out at the fading light. Her shoulders were tight, her stance rigid. She didn't know I was watching. When she finally turned around, her eyes met mine, but they felt cold, distant. I'd seen that look before, when she was keeping something from me. Not like she meant to hide it, but like she'd already decided I wouldn't get it. I didn't know how to react. It's weird, right? How you can spend years with someone and still feel like you don't know them. That's what hit me. Like I didn't really know Jennifer anymore. I tried talking to her, tried to close that gap, but she was always busy. There was always something or someone else. When I asked questions, she'd get quiet, her answers short and vague. The longer it went on, the more I started thinking her late nights and weekend trips were hiding something. Like there was a part of her life I wasn't allowed to know. I don't know when it first crossed my mind, but the thought started eating at me that maybe she was seeing someone else. A new guy. Someone I didn't know. It made my stomach churn, but I couldn't shake it. That's when I started noticing him. At first, I didn't think much of it. I'd seen him around but never paid attention. He was a truck driver, one of those guys who rolled through town on long hauls, stopping at the gas station or diner for a break. No reason to think he was anything special. But then I saw him again, talking to Jennifer. It was outside the grocery store. He was leaning against his truck, and she was laughing. A real laugh. Not the kind she gave me anymore, but the kind she used to have when she was happy. I didn't make much of it at first. He was just some guy passing through, right? But the way she acted with him, the way she seemed so at ease, it didn't sit right. There was something in her body language, and how she looked at him, that made me feel like I was crashing a moment that wasn't meant for me. I started seeing them together more often. Jennifer would bring him up casually, like it was nothing. I ran into Chris today, she'd say, and I'd nod, acting cool while listening harder than ever. Their talk seemed harmless, nothing too obvious, but the way she mentioned him, it was different. She was into him. It made me feel like an outsider in my own house. I should have called her out. I should have just asked her straight up what was going on, but I couldn't do it. The thought that my wife might be into someone else, that she might be feeling something with him I couldn't give her, it was too heavy to deal with. So, I kept my eyes open. I noticed how she smiled at him when she thought I wasn't watching, how she fixed her hair around him, how she seemed to light up when she talked about him. I tried to brush it off, tell myself it was no big deal, but deep down, I knew. I was losing her. That's when this heavy feeling hit me, this dread that kept growing. It wasn't just a what if anymore, it was real, building up bit by bit. It wasn't about if something was going on, it was about when I'd find out the truth. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face it. I knew something was off, deep down. I kept pretending, telling myself I was just overthinking, that it was just life and work wearing us down. But then it hit me like a kick to the stomach, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a Saturday night. Jennifer said she was going to see her sister in the next town over. She'd done it before, a quick trip, a couple hours, no big deal. I didn't think twice about it. I stayed home, like usual, working on some cars at the shop, then cracking a beer alone in the garage. But that night, the house felt too quiet, too empty, like it was closing in on me. I decided to drive into town. As I passed the diner, I saw her car, and right next to it, his truck. My heart stopped for a second. I don't know why I didn't just keep driving, why I didn't pretend I didn't see them. Maybe I needed to know for sure, or maybe I had to see it myself to stop kidding myself. I parked across the street, out of sight, and just sat there. I watched Jennifer and Chris by his truck. They were laughing, talking, so comfortable with each other, so close it hurt to see. Jennifer's smile was big, real, the kind she hadn't given me in months. I could hear her laugh from my truck, and it twisted something inside me. Then I saw it. Chris put his hand on her arm, just a light touch, but she didn't pull back. She let his hand stay there, and it made my blood run cold. They stood close, faces almost touching. Jennifer tilted her head a bit, looking up at him with a softness I hadn't seen in forever. She leaned in closer, just enough to show she wasn't just chatting, she was connected to them. The air felt heavy, my heart pounding. I didn't want to see this. I didn't want to be here, but I couldn't look away. She wasn't my Jennifer anymore. She was his. Then he kissed her. It wasn't like the quick, half-hearted pecks we'd shared lately. No, this was different. He held her face gently, and Jennifer didn't pull away. She didn't hesitate. She leaned into him, her lips soft and willing. It felt like it lasted forever, and my heart broke right there. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just sat in my truck, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the betrayal sink into me like a rock. They kissed like they were the only two people around. Her hands moved to his chest, pulling him closer. I saw how she touched him, gentle, familiar, the way she used to touch me. Then she wrapped her arms around him, pressing herself against him, so close I could see how she fit against him. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a connection, one that didn't include me. In that moment, I felt like a stranger to her. The jealousy, the anger, it boiled up, but something else took over. Something heavier. Helplessness. It wasn't just a woman kissing a guy. It was my life falling apart, piece by piece. And it didn't stop there. Her hands slid down his chest, over his stomach, and I knew where they were headed. I saw her press closer, her body reacting to his touch. She pulled him toward the side of the truck, pushing him against it, and kissed him again, harder, with a kind of urgency. Her hands slipped under his jacket, touching him, feeling him. Her fingers moved with a rhythm that used to be mine, but now it was his. Right then, I couldn't catch my breath. I wanted to yell, to run over and yank her away from him, but I was stuck, like my body wouldn't move. I didn't know what to do or how to handle it. I wanted to shout, to make her see what she was doing to me, but I just couldn't. Instead, I sat there, frozen, watching her give herself to him the way she used to with me, the way I'd taken for granted. They kept going. She didn't stop. Through the window, I could see them, so close, their bodies pressed tight, moving slow and careful. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to see it, had to know the truth, no matter how bad it hurt. It wasn't until they pulled apart that I could move again, but it felt like too late. I watched, still in shock, as Jennifer wiped her lips, fixed her clothes, and looked at Chris with eyes that didn't belong to me. I didn't know the woman standing there. I didn't recognize the woman who used to laugh with me, who kissed me like I was her whole world. And right then, I knew she wasn't mine anymore. I sat in my truck for what felt like forever, hands locked on the wheel, heart pounding like a drum. The woman I loved, the life I thought we had, she betrayed me. In that quiet, it hit me. I had to face the truth. Jennifer had picked him. She chose him over me. I should have walked up to them right there, but I couldn't. Instead, I turned the key, started the truck, and drove off. The pain was too raw, too fresh. I didn't know what I could even do anymore. Walking into the house felt like stepping into a trap. The weight of what I'd seen, the betrayal, the broken trust, hit me like a ton of bricks, pulling me down into a hole I couldn't climb out of. I'd seen her with it. It was burned into my brain, replaying every second. There was no way to deny it now. I'd watched my wife pressed against him, looking at him with a longing she never gave me. The kiss, the closeness, the way she moved with him, like she belonged to him. It slammed into me like a cold, hard weight. She didn't even try to hide it. Her actions said more than words ever could. As much as I wanted to pretend it wasn't real, I couldn't. I'd seen it, and the truth was right there, staring me in the face. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of the mess in my head, but nothing added up. How did we get here? How did the woman I trusted with everything slip away like that? The woman who used to hold me, who promised we'd have a future, how could she throw it all away for it? I didn't want to be in that house anymore. The walls, our home, felt like a prison. Every corner, every picture, every moment we'd shared felt like a lie. I needed to get out. I needed space, time to think, time to breathe. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. She came home that night, and her presence felt like a storm about to break. I heard her footsteps before she walked in, her shoes echoing in the empty hallway. She didn't look different. No guilt, no shame. Just empty, like she knew I'd seen and didn't care. The woman who used to be my everything was gone, replaced by someone I didn't know. She tried talking to me, but I couldn't hear it. Her words were empty, meaningless. What can she say to fix this? What excuse could make it okay that she gave herself to him? I saw the hesitation in her eyes as she came closer, but there was no warmth, no love, just a faint shadow of the woman I used to know. And right then, I got it. I didn't mean anything to her anymore. It hit me like a punch to the face. She'd chosen him. She'd chosen to throw away everything we built, everything we'd worked for him, and there was nothing I could do to change it. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her feel the hurt she'd caused. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her with a cold, deep feeling. I wasn't mad, not yet. I was just broken. And the worst part? I didn't think she even cared. The days after that blurred together. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. All I could do was replay what I'd seen, over and over, like a movie stuck on loop. Her hands on him, her lips on his. The way they moved together, so comfortable, like they were meant to be. It ate at me, tearing apart what I thought we had. I watched her every day, acting like nothing was wrong. But I saw it in her eyes, the guilt, the shame, the distance. It didn't fix anything. It couldn't undo what she'd done. It couldn't patch up the mess she'd made. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with her there, not with her betrayal hanging over me like a dark cloud. The gap between us was real, and I couldn't stand it. I started hanging out at the shop more, burying myself in work. It was the only place that felt halfway normal. But even there, my thoughts wouldn't quit. They kept coming, her wisdom, together, her touch, his touch. The life they'd built without me. And that's when it hit me. Just walking away wasn't enough. Letting her go wasn't enough. I needed more. She'd taken everything from me, and now it was time to make her pay. I wasn't gonna let this slide. Not now, not ever. I spent the next few days planning, quietly, carefully, covering my tracks. I knew what I had to do. I had to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. But Chris needed to feel it too. He needed to know the same empty pain that was eating me alive. He would pay. They both would. The anger inside me was like a low burn, pushing me to act. I couldn't keep acting like everything was okay. I was done playing the idiot. She'd picked him over me. Now it was time for him to see what it meant to take everything from someone. The plan was simple, thought out. I spent days watching, waiting, making sure it was all set. I had to be certain, dead sure, this would go down right. It wasn't just about getting even anymore. It wasn't just about making Jennifer pay for throwing everything away like it was nothing. No, it was about taking control. It was about grabbing back the power she'd ripped away from me and making her, and him, feel the weight of their betrayal. Chris was an easy mark. I knew his schedule, his truck, his hours, where he'd be. He had no clue what was coming, no idea his life was ending tonight. The night was dead quiet, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. The kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum in the dark. I was ready, more than ready. I drove to the edge of town, to the truck stop where I knew Chris would be. His truck was parked in its usual spot, under the faint street lights. I pulled my car a bit down the road, tucked in the shadows. My pulse was steady, my mind clear, no room for second thoughts, no room for doubt. This was it. I sat there, watching him. He was by his truck, talking on his phone, completely clueless about what was coming. Seeing him, the guy who'd taken so much from me, lit a cold, dark fire inside me. I hated him with everything I had. I couldn't shake the image of Jennifer looking at him, touching him, the way she'd been his. It burned in my head, feeding the rage that had been building for days. When he hung up and started toward his truck's cab, I moved, fast, quiet, closing in on him. He didn't see me until it was too late. I grabbed him by the throat, slamming him against the truck. His eyes went wide, hands flailing to push me off, but it was no use. He was too slow, too caught off guard. He didn't even get a chance to yell. I had him, and I wasn't letting go. In that moment, I had no doubts, no regrets. All I felt was the weight of it all, the years of betrayal, the pain, the brokenness, rushing up inside me. I watched the life fade from his eyes, felt his last breath slip away. There was no thrill in it, no release, just the same hollow emptiness that had been eating me up. The silence was loud as I stood there, holding him, feeling his body go limp in my hands. When it was done, I let him drop. His body hit the ground with a dull thud, a sound that felt final. I stood over him for a second, staring at the guy who'd stolen my wife, my life. And as I looked at him, I realized it didn't make me feel better. The pain was still there, but it had to be done. I turned and walked away, not looking back. The night swallowed me up, and as I drove home, the weight of what I'd done settled into me. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the emptiness that came after, the cold knot in my gut. Driving through the dark streets, all I could see was Jennifer, her face, her touch, her betrayal. She'd never know the price he paid, the price I made him pay. She'd never know the darkness that had taken over me, that had pushed me to this. But I didn't need her to know. I didn't need her to get it. I'd taken everything from her for me, and that was enough. That's all for today's tale. If you liked this ride, hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe for more wild stories like this. Got any thoughts or stuff you want to share? Toss them in the comments. I'd love to check them out. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe.